I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself a question that seems simple, but is actually one of the most terrifying questions a human being can face. How do you know that you are sane? You might say, well, I perceive reality correctly. I make logical decisions. I know who I am. But what if the definition of your sanity didn't depend on what is inside your head, but rather on where you are standing and what label society has slapped onto your file? Imagine you are perfectly healthy. You wake up, brush your teeth, have breakfast, and then walk into a psychiatric hospital. You approach the admission desk and tell the doctor just one lie. You say, I hear voices. When they ask what the voices say, you repeat three specific words, empty, hollow, and thud. After that moment, you never lie again. You act completely normal. You are polite, rational, and calm. Do you think the doctors would realize their mistake? Do you think they would see the healthy person standing in front of them? Or would the heavy doors lock behind you, trapping you in a world where your protestations of sanity only serve as proof of your madness? In 1973, a psychologist named David Rosenhan from Stanford University decided to test this nightmare scenario in the real world. He wasn't interested in abstract theories. He wanted to expose the fragile reality of psychiatric diagnosis. He suspected that the distinction between the sane and the insane was not as clear-cut as the medical community believed. He hypothesized that the diagnosis wasn't resident in the patient, but in the environment itself. To prove this, he launched a study that would shatter the confidence of the psychiatric world. It was called On Being Sane in Insane Places. Rosenhan recruited a diverse team of 8 brave individuals to serve as pseudo-patients. This group was not made up of actors. It included a psychology graduate student, 3 psychologists, a pediatrician, a psychiatrist, a painter, and a housewife. They were ordinary people with stable lives, families, and jobs. Before the experiment, they had to ensure they were chemically clean, so they didn't swallow the medication, they just had to get in. But they were terrified. In their personal notes, many of them admitted they feared they would be exposed as frauds immediately in the admission room, leading to intense embarrassment. Even worse, some feared they would be mistakenly diagnosed and locked up for years. The plan was executed across 5 different states and 12 different hospitals. Rosenhan wanted to ensure that the results couldn't be dismissed as the fault of a single bad institution. So, they targeted a wide range of facilities. Some were old, underfunded, an overcrowded state-run asylums with peeling paint and dark corridors. Others were prestigious, expensive, private hospitals with manicured lawns and highly credentialed staff. The pseudo-patients arrived at the admissions office complaining of auditory hallucinations. They chose the words empty, hollow, and thud, specifically because they implied an existential crisis, a void in life, rather than a typical psychotic episode. Interestingly, these symptoms were not linked to any known disorder in the literature of that time. The results were immediate and disturbing. Every single pseudo-patient was admitted, despite showing no other symptoms. And despite behaving completely normally the moment the admission interview was over, 11 of them were diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and 1 with manic, depressive psychosis. But the admission was only the beginning of the ordeal. Rosenhan had given his team a strict directive. Once you are inside, stop acting. Be yourself, convince them you are sane by being sane. However, they quickly discovered that inside the walls of a psychiatric ward, the definition of normal evaporates. This is where the experiment revealed the terrifying power of what sociologists call labeling theory. Once the doctors had attached the label of schizophrenia to these individuals, every single action they took was reinterpreted to fit that label. The label acted like a filter, distorting reality. For example, the pseudo-patients were tasked with writing down their observations. They didn't hide this. They walked around the day rooms with notebooks, jotting down details about staff interactions and patient behavior. In the outside world, this is called taking notes. But inside, a nurse observed one of the researchers and wrote in his daily medical chart, patient engages in writing behavior. It was seen as a compulsive pathological symptom of his illness, not a rational activity. Even their personal histories were twisted. During the admission interviews, the pseudo-patients gave truthful accounts of their lives, their relationships, their jobs, their childhoods. But in the doctor's discharge summaries, these normal life events were rewritten to explain the diagnosis. A perfectly healthy relationship with a parent or a spouse was reanalyzed in the medical notes to show deep-seated pathology or emotional instability that simply didn't exist. The diagnosis became a self-fulfilling prophecy. The experience of living inside was dehumanizing. The pseudo-patients reported feeling invisible. They would approach staff members to ask simple questions like, "Pardon me, Dr. X, could you tell me when I will be eligible for grounds privileges?" In the vast majority of cases, the doctors and nurses would simply ignore them, walking past as if they were furniture, or they would give a completely unrelated answer while looking away. The average amount of time the doctor spent with the patients was calculated to be just under 7 minutes per day. The rest of the time, the patients were left alone in a drugged haze. Speaking of drugs, the team was given a staggering total of nearly 200 pills during their stay. They didn't take them, of course. They became experts at cheeking, the medication and spitting it out later, or flushing it down the toilet. And here is the twist: they noticed that the real patients were doing the exact same thing. The toilets were often found lined with dissolved medication. Ironically, while the highly trained medical staff was completely fooled by the act, the actual patients were not. Throughout the experiment, 35 legitimate patients approached the researchers and voiced their suspicions. They would say things like, "You're not crazy. You're checking up on the hospital," or "You must be a journalist or a professor." The people society had deemed insane were the only ones capable of seeing the reality of the situation, while the sane doctors were blinded by their own textbooks. The team spent an average of 19 days in confinement. The shortest stay was 7 days, and the longest was a harrowing 52 days. When they were finally released, not a single one was declared cured or sane. Their discharge papers read schizophrenia in remission. This is a crucial detail. It meant that legally and medically, they were still considered to be schizophrenics. The system believed the disease was merely dormant. The label was permanent. When Rosenhan published these explosive findings in the journal Science, the backlash was furious. The psychiatric community felt attacked. They argued that the experiment was unfair, that of course doctors would err on the side of caution. One prestigious teaching hospital, which had a reputation for excellence, challenged Rosenhan directly. They essentially said, "Your study is flawed. It may have happened in those underfunded places, but it could never happen here. Our staff is too brilliant. If you try to send a fake patient to us, we will catch them." Rosenhan accepted the challenge. He agreed that over the next 3 months, he would send one or more pseudo-patients to their hospital. The hospital staff went on high alert. The atmosphere changed. Every psychiatrist, every nurse, and every attendant began scrutinizing every new admission, looking for the telltale signs of an imposter. They were determined to prove that their diagnostic skills were flawless. At the end of the 3 months, the hospital proudly released their statistics. They had processed 193 new patients. With great confidence, they announced that they had identified 41 patients as definite imposters sent by Rosenhan, and another 42 as highly suspicious. They believed they had successfully filtered out the fakes. And then Rosenhan delivered the final devastating blow. He revealed the truth: "I never sent a single person." The silence that followed was deafening. The hospital had turned away, misdiagnosed, or treated with suspicion dozens of real human beings suffering from real mental health crises, simply because they were afraid of being tricked. They were so focused on finding the lie that they lost the ability to treat the truth. The Rosenhan experiment remains one of the most significant studies in the history of psychology. It didn't prove that mental illness is a myth. Mental suffering is very real. But it forced the medical community to look in the mirror. It proved that a diagnosis is not just a medical fact. It is a powerful